So you're playing Valorant on console and you want to improve. Here are 10 tips that you can apply immediately. They're a little bit more than 10 because there's a bunch of subcategories, but the number's sort of irrelevant. The first thing I want to talk about is focus mode. It is one of the primary features that is unique to console. And as you can tell right now, if I click focus mode, I am slow walking. It forces me to slow walk. So if I turn on focus mode here and want to peek the Jett, she has an easy target because I'm moving at negative Mach speed. It doesn't work. So first things first, go into your controls, go down to the focus mode while walk and turn it off. Now I can focus mode while running, allowing me to wide peek, jiggle peek, and various other things that we'll cover in just a bit. With that out of the way, let's go on to tip number 2, which is crosshair placement. Practice in DM and record your screen. On console, you guys have it easy. It's just all built into the console. Record that screen and watch where your crosshair is. Even when you want to peek, you should be pointing the crosshair into the wall where the enemy's head would be after you peek. Imagine you have aim hacks or wall hacks and you can see through the wall. Where do you believe the enemy will be? Also, don't ADS unless it's far range because it's not the most optimal way to shoot in Valorant. But crosshair placement is one of the easiest ways to improve immediately. Literally immediately, especially on console where you can set up your crosshair to be head level and then just use the analog stick to move left and right without actually having to readjust, which makes things a ton easier. Yes, sometimes you're gonna have to flick, but for the most part, place that crosshair where the head should be and then just slightly adjust like I'm doing here. I'm farming kills by doing scoping, pressing shoot. That is it. Yes, I will whiff. Yes, I will make mistakes and this Jett stopped moving for some reason, but that's besides the point. And something else I'm also gonna have to go ahead and say, if you're watching a bunch of montages or top players play console right now, it may disencourage you, but there's a massive gap at the moment of PC players who have now played for 4 years and then can also aim on console and are porting over, and then you guys who are brand new to Valorant maybe have barely checked it out on PC, etc. You need to give yourselves some time. You have to be okay with understanding mistakes will be made, and that's okay. People montage only the absolute best parts. Look here, I still focus on my crosshair placement with 4 HP. It was aimed alongside Killjoy, but I just died, and that's okay. You still need to be practicing these good habits even if other mistakes are being made alongside them. And by recording and watching, it's the best way because here I now know, even though my crosshair placement was good, I simply died because I didn't stop moving fully before taking that shot on Killjoy. Okay, the next thing is peeking. You can jiggle peek, you can wide peek, you can normal peek, you can jump peek, you can stop dry peeking because that's a huge problem. Let's get into all of them right now. There's no one really great peek. Instead, it's about using a ton of different maneuvers and different peeks at all different times to keep yourself unpredictable and give yourself the best chance in a particular situation. Starting with the jiggle peek, it is quite simple. Use cover to jiggle in and out of it, and then you're able to take shots at the point where you stop moving, transitioning from left and right. It's a great way to clear angles and take fights using cover. Now, jiggle peeking is definitely great, but it's not my favorite on console for some reason. I actually prefer wide swinging, and let me explain why it's so good. It's to do with strafing. As you can see, it took some time for this Jett to kill me. So this is a wide swing right here. I line up my crosshair through the wall like I have wall hacks, and I'm able to just wide swing it. If we slow it down here, you can see my crosshair is almost perfectly aligned with their head, and I just have to micro adjust after that. The last peek to just quickly go over is the jump peek, where you can use your knife and do a little bit of a jump, so I was able to clear that angle and see that there was an enemy there. And jump peeking is one of the safest ways to collect information, and in case you don't have abilities and you don't want to commit to a peek, jump peek to gather that info. Now make sure to put your peek together with strafing. Once you've decided how you're going to peek, could be a standard peek, a jiggle peek, etc., add some strafing. So here against the Killjoy, I actually peek right, then micro adjust and strafe again right, and it just completely has her miss the bullet. And then the practice will create a habit. For example, standard peek the deadlock here, I move left, right, left, left. Like it's like playing a little bit of a game, right? To keep yourself unpredictable and have the enemy miss as many shots as possible. A lot of new players will eventually just start strafing left then right, but you want to mix it up, maybe double left, double right, triple left, etc., just to keep the enemy guessing. Something else to mention is the angle that you're actually peeking on. So the more 90 degrees you are, the faster your movement will appear. And I think a lot of creators like to keep this simple, where let's say you just look at the wall and then completely move left or completely move right, keeping yourself at a perfect 90-degree angle. Realistically, the idea is to always think of angles to put your opponent at a disadvantage. So for example, here after getting the pick, I quickly see that there's a Killjoy. This one was a little bit more of a lucky kill. Then I wide swing here on the Jett because I know she's holding the close angle, so she'd have to flick in order to try and kill me, just putting myself at an advantage and her at a disadvantage. Speaking of angles, make sure you're isolating them. Here, I know that I can take a fight on stair, I miss, And then because there's a smoke up, I'm isolating my furthest right, allowing me to get a kill on Neon. Now that the cage dropped, they could peek from both sides, which they did, making it a lot harder for me to nail that kill. Luckily, I survived. I don't want to dry peek, so I throw 2 blinds in order to take over sight, and then I see the clove. I isolate the angle, fake plant in order for her to peek, and keep in mind, the only reason this was isolated is because my Cypher was actually already watching behind me, and that's when he spots a fade, allowing me to now know she is up in Boba. After fake planting and realizing she didn't peek for a while, I can see on the map due to Cypher, I know that she's probably wrapping around. I commit to planting the spike, and then I decide I want to continue to isolate the angle since my Cypher has my flank. I then decide to wide swing by looking at the wall, 90 degrees, make sure my crosshair is lined up, and then I do a tiny bit of micro strafing in order to get the kill. So that's a way to teach you something new and put everything together. Now keep in mind, I'm not a Radiant player, but I'm hoping to be a good teacher in a sense, where you can actually see average gameplay, something a lot more maybe attuned to you guys who are playing, and then see what's happening both right and wrong with good examples. Now are some more general aiming tips and tricks. So the first thing is I'm seeing a lot of console users crouch. So crouching is tricky. You should not be crouch spraying by instinct. That is very bad, and crouching needs to be purposeful. Maybe when you're poached up somewhere to like where you can isolate an angle, maybe it's just to change up a peak. So maybe you peek then crouch, just because you know you're playing a lot higher ranks who are aiming for your head. But overall, crouching just needs to stop being an instinct and needs to only be done if you are mentally thinking I'm going to crouch because X, Y, and Z. If it's so bad, unbind your crouch for a little bit. Some pros have even done that, because you need to be focusing on your crosshair placement and clearing, isolating angles based off of where the enemy's head will be. You can see here in the clip, I keep isolating angles, and not once am I ready to crouch. Instead, I'm peeking in a way where my crosshair is already going to line up with their head. If I peek and then crouch, I need to readjust my crosshair. It can put me at a disadvantage. Crouching, again, needs to be purposeful. Tone it down a little bit. Another thing is don't spray. It is super situational, like right up in your face type of situational. Spraying is heavily punished in Valorant, and you need to stop it. You need to take your time, aim for the head. I showed you that clip where Jet wasn't able to kill me for a while, and the idea here is you have more time than you believe. By using strafes, by using proper peaks, you give yourself more time to move that analog stick, put the crosshair on their head, and tap. Or maybe burst, but try not to spray. There's tap, bursting, and spraying, and that's the big thing here. If I'm on the Phantom, I might spray a bit. You can see here, I sprayed then pulled down. This does make a lot of sense, but my second peek here, I spray and hold that spray, and it literally cost me my life. Luckily, I had enough time to win the round, but if I literally just bursted, then readjusted my crosshair instead of sprayed and tried to control it, I would have gotten some more kills. This is just a fact. If you ignore all that, aim down sight, spray and pray, then this is what it's gonna look like. But we're going to use this as a learning moment. The first thing is the only reason I was actually holding A site is because the previous round, which was on B site, we absolutely dominated them. And my prediction was that they were going to come A, so we all stacked A. This is the first thing you got to do. You got to analyze your game and think logically. I did whiff, and that's okay. I am now at 10 HP, so what is my next step here? I'm Reyna, and I need a heal. So I've got to be cheeky, I got to be ratty, and I need to not take a 50-50 fight because I will lose it with this little HP. So instead, I spot a nice little tripwire set up by my Cypher, and I hold this corner to give myself the best advantage possible to try and farm a heal. Luckily, it works exactly like planned, and I'm able to grab that heal and rejoin my team in pushing and pinching whoever's remaining. I keep thinking logically. They lost on A, they lost on B, so the only place they haven't tried is mid. So I'm going to throw out a blind to cover myself and quickly take space mid by moving over here on the left, and luckily I had my ISO collapse in with me, allowing us to pinch and take an advantage by finding a pick. And this logic will also help you kind of stir away from having a bad mental, which is a big problem in Valorant. For example, let's say you all push a site and the enemies were stacking, right? You and your team, we're going to push A. 5 of us push A, 4 people were stacking. You might feel like, oh my God, they're always stacking. But instead think logically. Maybe they're not always stacking. Instead, maybe they're just rotating quickly. Now that you've determined that they rotate quickly, take advantage of that. Maybe you have someone lurk mid to try and get a pick while they're rotating. Maybe you rotate back quicker. So you start playing out fakes. You fake a site and then hit a different one since you know that they all rotate quickly, meaning one site will be empty when they do that. Think logically and then apply it to try and create strategies in order to win. which I know brings on the next thing, which is play with your team even if they don't play with you, because everything I just said makes you feel like this only works if my team is playing with me, but you can actually play with them even if they're not exactly playing with you back. And here's a great example. Oh, you guys are gonna love this one. For example, your team is pushing up, but they're not listening to you. You said you don't want to push up. Let's say you want to default, or if you want to fake and then rotate, but they're like, nah, I want to fight. So they're pushing up and then they die. And you're all the way in the back just waiting. You're upset. It's my team's fault. Why'd they push? Why didn't they play off of me? And then now you have to fight and then you die and the round's over. Okay, let's flip the script here. Instead, your team's pushing up, they're not listening. Change of plans. It's time to trade out. Make sure to be in a position where when your team takes that fight, in case they die, you're able to trade that pick. So you're able to get 1 for 1 and keep the round going. The minute you lose someone to a trade, you are at a disadvantage. So if they die and you don't get a trade on them, that's it. You are permanently on a disadvantage for the rest of that round. So the least you can do is try to play with them, for example, and get that pick. Same thing, you plant the spike, you want them to cover heaven, they're covering main or whatever, then you cover heaven. Just look for the points that are open and play off of your team, even if they're not playing off of you. The next thing we're going to talk about a little bit here is locking in on your main agent, which is the idea of learning a few agents only. The worst thing you can do as a new player, and trust me, I did the same thing, is bounce around every agent thinking you can play this, thinking you can play that. No, you've got to lock into comfort picks. Now, you know, being a one trick only is probably not fully ideal, but even if you start as a one trick, it's okay. I mean, I climbed the most when I was insta locking, to be honest. I'm just going to be completely transparent. It is decent to play with your team. It is still good to think about a team comp, but they matter less in the mid and low ranks, and even like, to be honest, diamond, plat, whatever, no problem. When I've won countless 5 duelist games, and that's not to say be like toxic. Like if you can work with your team, see what, you know, roles you need, how you want to play, that's still good, but at least learning 1, 2, maybe 3 agents all within one role first and dedicating all your time to that will go a long way. And once, you know, a few months have passed, you've really locked into the fundamentals and advanced tactics on those agents, then you can learn new role as well as some new agents. It's still good to be versatile, but you don't want to start just completely versatile. You're versatile by building your skill set one by one. You know what I mean? Lock into learning one thing. Now, from there, the next thing I want to talk about a little bit here is not to hold on to your ultimate too long within the game. The idea here is as long as you have an ult, you're not farming the next ult, which is no good. If you're Reyna, it's simple. For example, everyone's on a full buy, pop that ult, last the whole round, you're now buffed. If you're Jet, maybe your team could full buy, but you couldn't, or, you know, you want to take an advantage on an eco, you're able to pop your knives then. You know, same as everything. If you're Breach, just use it on an execute. Don't be too hesitant. Of course, use it with purpose, but don't overhold it to the point where you're barely using your ult at all. It's a common mistake that we see often. Also, commit to using your abilities, but just don't throw them randomly. So the minute you have your abilities, use them with purpose. Throw those abilities out. Just don't throw them willy-nilly. For example, Sova mains often just, when they're starting off on Sova, they're just randomly throwing the dart without thinking, where is it going or why am I throwing it? What's the purpose? They throw the dart and then the entire team backs off. You know what I mean? You throw the dart, you get the info. What are you doing with that info? Just use your abilities often, but use them with purpose. It's just Valorant, fundamentally one of the best tips I can give is the minute you're autopiloting, you'll lose on Valorant. Every time you're deciding how I'm going to peek, you commit to a far peek or a wide peek. You commit to jiggle peeking. You commit to a site. You commit to a plan. You commit to using your abilities. You know what I mean? And you're doing it all with purpose. I am going to do this. I'm going to think of what I'm doing pre-round. You know, there's time. There's a time before those barriers drop. Think about what you're going to do. Seriously, think about what you're going to do. Don't just buy and then rush to a barrier, knifing the barrier with no thought. And you already know you've done it. I've done it. You've already seen your entire team do it because it's just something that we do. The more mindful we become while playing Valorant, the better we get. That's just, it's one-to-one. And yes, those are technically a lot more than 10 tips. They're just kind of categorized like focus mode, crosshair placement, peeking, strafing, isolating angles, aiming, analyzing, playing with your team, locking into your main agent, and mentality. Those are sort of the 10 overarching, and then I subcategorize them into a countless different tips. But regardless, I hope if you listened all the way through, you learned something new, or it got you in a better mindset to go improve while playing Valorant. In the end, as long as you're grinding and it's not mindless, so you're learning, you'll end up improving.